Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Voice of Adoptees, which brings together diverse and unique voices from around the world to share their stories. If you like today's episode, remember to give us a like, subscribe, and leave a review. Here's your host, David Shunk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Voice of Adoptees. Today, we're joined by Kat. She is adopted from Russia. Fun fact, she was actually adopted from Russia similar time period as me, so this should be a very interesting conversation. Kat, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for your time, and we look forward hearing your story. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Would you like the short part of it first? Of
Whatever
just
you'd like.
The gist?
The floor is yours.
Okay. All right. So I was originally born named as Ludmila Ivanova. My birthday is, September 26th, and I was born in 1994 in Russia in Krasnoyarsk, and I was in Russia from 1994 to 1997 and got adopted by an American couple and came to the States and kind of moved around a little bit, and I am now here in Missouri.
How do you like it down there?
I grew up mostly in Southern California, so it's really different here. Most of my childhood was spent in Southern California.
Okay, so like LA area, or?
In between LA and San Diego is a city called Temecula, so it's about an hour from each LA and San Diego.
Okay, wow, great.
Yeah.
Great. So I guess let's start from the beginning. So you said you were adopted 1997. You were about 2.
Correct. Yeah, almost 2.5. Yeah.
It's safe to say you don't have any memories, really?
I have one memory, and it's just a description. I asked my parents if I had this visual of the courthouse waiting outside of the courtroom, and I just remember this curved wall and being near this, didn't know where I was, but just a curved wall. Didn't really know what was happening. And we have no photos. We have photos and videos of stuff from me in Russia, but we don't have any photos of that. And I asked them if that's actually what it looked like, and they said it was. So I guess.
Wow, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So definitely can't make that up.
So when you were adopted into the U.S., did you always feel like you were adopted, or did you figure it out on your own, or kind of how did that come into play?
So I know I asked my mom when I was younger. I think I always knew there was something different because my parents have an age gap. They were 22 years apart. And so I don't think I actually understood the concept of adoption because I also didn't understand the concept of being born from someone either. And so I think as I grew up as a kid, later on learned what actual adoption meant. But
okay. When would you say, about what age were you when it hit you that you were from Russia and you have this whole other side of you and you have a family over there, and you start thinking about those questions? How old were you, would you say, that started to happen?
I mean, I knew. So we first lived in Nashville, Tennessee in the States, and I knew whenever I went places, I always wanted to talk to people, and I knew growing up at school, I would always tell people that I was adopted from Russia, and so I always thought that was cool and something that was unique about me, and something my school actually let me do sometime was teach them Russian, some Russian words that I knew, and so I taught my class some basic words. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Did you ever get exposure from your adoptive parents at all about anything Russian related? Like, did they celebrate the holidays, or did they take you to the Russian local store, try to cook some Russian food for you, or were they very hands-off in that approach?
They didn't take me to Russian markets, restaurants, or anything like that, but what they did do was they collected Russian items for me in a cabinet. And so in my house, I have a cabinet just full of Russian things, full of glasses, toys that kids would have had, military hats, matryoshka dolls, plates, Fabergés, eggs for those. we don't know. I think that's what they're called. Fabergé eggs, just different things. So I have a collection of that.
Yeah.
And then I think my mom tried making me something one time. I want to say it was pelmeni, but I think she tried making it from scratch once or something like that. So
Didn't turn out too well.
I don't remember.
Wow. Okay. So you said that you mentioned the Russian language. Was that self-taught, or were you getting some help from a Russian teacher nearby?
So when my parents brought me back over, I did speak some Russian to the point to where they didn't really understand what I was saying to them, and I didn't understand what they were saying to me. So I knew it, like, when I came over. I didn't really maintain any of it except for the basic "Привет, до свидания, доброе утро, спокойной ночи, я тебя люблю." My parents called me Dochka growing up, which is Russian for daughter, so that was my nickname growing up. And I actually went by Katya growing up as a kid because I struggled with the name Kathleen, and I don't know if that was because of the TH sound in the name and that not being a Russian sound, or if it was just hard to spell, maybe a little bit of both. But
Yeah.
I know I went by Katya growing up, and I think in high school I self-taught myself how to read Russian and all of that. And last year I started doing Babbel, but then in November of last year, I think it was the day right before Thanksgiving, I found out that there's this online class, and I started taking it then. And from November of last year till now, I am to the point to where I am sending Russian, I don't want to get ahead, but Russian, voice messages to my Russian mom and my sister and stuff like that. So, and they'll say stuff back to make sure that they're understanding what I'm saying, and some of it they may not understand, but I'm to the point to where I can have basic conversations and tell someone about my day.
Wow. That's really great. That's really cool to learn to embrace the language and to make that connection with, like, your other side is something that is personal, and to us that means something. It means a lot, and the fact that you're doing that and willing to do that is, it's a big deal. Some people might think it's not, but it definitely is a big deal. So you mentioned your Russian family a little bit, but before we
Yeah.
get there, let's talk about, first off, like, some basics of when did you want to conduct a search and find your family? Let's start there. Like, what made you want to find them?
I also have stuff about my parents bringing me over to Russia too to talk about. Well, like, you want me to start from the beginning timeline?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So my parents went through an agency called Cradle of Hope, and they are based out in Maryland. And the director at the time was Linda Perlstein, and the adoption agency is still in business today. And they basically, my parents got a social worker, helped get through the whole pre-approval process of adoption. They had references and all of that. And I don't know how other people got adopted, but I know for my parents, they were basically given a binder of photos to go through, of children to pick. And all they had, I think, was just a photo and a name.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get any other information until they actually picked someone. And so they had to really, pray hard, think about it, which child they wanted to pick. And I know they looked at a few other different countries, and different countries have different regulations where their combined age has to be in their 30s or less. Or in Russia at the time they had to have a combined age of less than 100. So then they chose Russia and wanted someone who would somewhat look and resemble them as well. And so once they selected me, they were then sent a just group of medical information and a video of me in the orphanage. And the video of me in the orphanage is, there's a spot of it from 1996, and there's a little portion of it in 1997. So I think they filmed maybe every year or so. I'm not sure, but there's 2 separate videos of that. And then they went from Tennessee to Atlanta to Frankfurt, Germany, and then to Moscow.
Wow.
And they stayed at a
About
host
those
family.
connections now.
Oh, right. Their flight from Moscow to Krasnoyarsk was a double-decker, and the plane partied all night. It was a midnight flight, so they didn't get any sleep.
There you go. Yep.
And so they stayed at a host family's house for about 7 or 8 hours before they had to get on to their next flight. And the second that they landed in Krasnoyarsk, they had no time to get ready. They needed sleep. They needed to shower and all of that. But they were like, it's time to go. Time to go to the orphanage and meet the director, Galina. And so they went into her office. I was at orphanage number 3 in Sosnovoborsk. And we had about 210 kids and 13 beds to each room, and maybe 1 to 2 caregivers and just a few toys. And so my mom, before leaving, brought a suitcase of donations to the orphanage. She put up a sign at work, and people donated clothes, toys, and stuff. So my dad and my mom brought that over as well.
That's awesome.
And so then they went into her office, and they went and got me. And the first thing I did was cry when my mom held me.
True love.
And
True love from a mother and a daughter. Yep.
Right. And I wanted nothing to do with my dad at all. It was actually any men at all, because we had no exposure to men in the orphanage. Everyone was female. Even the judge was female. Her name was Olga. My parents actually lived on Olga Avenue at the time in Tennessee, which was a funny coincidence. And she loved that. I think she thought that was really cool. And so basically they just kind of told my parents that I'm very strong-willed and all of that. And after getting all the medical information, going to like a pediatrician, they found out some of the stuff was inaccurate.
Yeah, that's very common. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so basically, the day that they were supposed to get medically cleared to leave Russia, the day before that was actually a holiday. So my parents had a free day of touring Russia. It was Russian May Day, which is their Labor Day, which is May 1st.
Yep.
So that kind of stopped things. I got to kind of tour around. We went to Red Square.
Yeah.
And all of that, different places. And so after that, we finally left. And when I had a 45-minute tantrum on the plane back. And I wanted to crawl under the seats on the plane, and I wasn't allowed to. And my parents couldn't tell me why, and in language that I understood. So
yeah, that's a bit complicated.
Yeah, so we got to Nashville, Tennessee, and my dad took me to a Toys R Us, and this is like maybe just a couple months in of being in the States.
Yeah.
And I guess the look on my face was that I was just overstimulated and didn't know what to do. All the toys were completely different than what was in the orphanage. And I think one person asked my dad, like, just what was going on. Like, I was riding a toy and saying, is she yours? And he said, yeah. And shared that I was adopted from Russia. They just brought me back. And he was like, oh, how's she liking it? He's like, well, she went from an orphanage of 210 kids sharing about very few toys, maybe 20 or less toys, to coming to the United States to have a family and have all these toys. So how do you think she's doing?
Yeah, seriously.
But from then, I became a citizen. I don't know if you had a waiting process. I know each state's different. I didn't actually become a U.S. citizen until 2001.
Yeah, that's crazy. I had citizenship pretty quickly, but I know when I was adopted, I came in on a Soviet issued, even though it was the Russian government. Yep.
Same.
Yep. The Soviet style passport and I got a alien card from the immigration of the U.S. And when I got my citizenship, it was just a certificate of citizenship. And the way I was never naturalized or anything like that. So it's always confusing because on every government form it asks, how are you a U.S. citizen? Is it by birth or naturalization? Mine's neither. But luckily, my parents were smart about it. So when the adoption paperwork went through, they brought me to the New Hampshire courts, and they basically kind of like re-adopted me and got letters from the New Hampshire courts that are sealed and signed that saying that the adoption is official in the eyes of the courts in the United States as well. So,
Awesome.
so yeah, I got a certificate of citizenship with a little baby face of me on it, and I have to, and I had to bring that everywhere I went as well. Like every
Yep.
college I applied
Hmm.
to, the fast file office reached out, every single one, and said, "We need more paperwork. We need more paperwork."
Hmm.
And everyone always
Yeah.
got a kick out of when I took out my citizenship paperwork, and yeah, this proves I'm a U.S. citizen. But thankfully, we have
Wow. Yeah.
passports. But still, I mean, but yeah,
Right.
so that's yeah. I've heard of a lot of adoptees similar stories from Russia who actually had to wait for citizenship for a long time, and
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
So I was 6 years old, turning 7 that year, before I
so you actually, so for those, what, 6 years in the U.S., you
mm,
four
4. 4.
years in the U.S., you were living on a visa.
I think so. I had the permanent alien, or
Yeah,
the alien card, the little thing.
so you
So
had to. I'm sure your parents had to register you at the embassy, and
I'm not sure actually what they did for that. I know they readopted me, but by this time we were already living in Southern
oh, okay,
California. So even maybe switching states even challenged things
yeah,
too. So,
yeah,
but I remember wearing my little red, white, and blue dress going to the citizenship ceremony.
yeah.
And all of us were just holding flags, just a room of kids, all of that. So yeah, it's interesting. And like I had the same issue with my social security card. I found out in 2020. I lost my card, tried to get a new social security card, and social security here was like, "You're not a U.S. citizen," and
Literally
I'm
the
like,
same
"Yes,
thing.
the
That's
same
crazy.
thing
The same thing
happened."
happened to me in the same year. Yeah. Yeah,
2020.
I lost mine too, and it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare
Yes.
because they're just like, yeah, yeah, they wrote back and sent a letter when I had to send copies and everything. I got a letter back and they said, invalid social security number. I'm like, um, what?
Oh
They're
my
like, yeah, nope, you're not a
gosh.
citizen. Do you have proof?
Did your heart sink?
Uh,
Mine
yeah,
sank.
a little bit, but then it's like, well, I have a U.S. passport right here and my certificate of citizenship in my hand, so it's kind of like, okay, you can't deny these. So,
I had a lady on the phone, and of course it's COVID at the time, so you can't even go in.
yeah,
And
we were able to.
she was like, "You can't come in unless it's an emergency." I was like, "I'm pretty sure this is an emergency."
Yeah, we ended up going in. That's another story for another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to the point where my mom came down and she's like, "We're gonna take care of this," and I'm like, "But you need an appointment, Mom. Like, you can't just walk in there." And she's like, "Oh yeah, watch me." And so we basically we just showed up unannounced at the Social Security office to the security guard saying, "Ma'am, you need an appointment." She's like, "Well, I'm not leaving." So they finally
Yeah.
came out and just said, "Okay, fine. Come back. We'll take care of it. What do you need?" Yeah,
Wow.
but
Yeah. I had to mail them my documents. I'm like, "You better not lose
yeah,
these."
me too.
The lady on the phone was like, "I don't know how you've gotten by all these years. I don't know how you had a job." And I'm like, "Well, I have a U.S. passport and I'm a notary for the state of Missouri. So you have to be a citizen to do that." And, all of that. I don't know. Even the notary form, the only options were, "What state were you born in?" I said to them, I'm like, "What if I wasn't born in these states?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Lots of fun red tape.
yep, yep.
And so, yeah, to kind of go into your question of like when I got
Yeah,
interested in searching, I would say kind of grew more when I was 18 years old.
Same thing as me. Yep.
Man. And my parents gave me my documents on my 18th birthday to kind of look through them. And that's when I found out I had a middle name, my patronymic name, and didn't know that I had one. And that was kind of cool to find out. It's Venedievna, and did 23andMe when I was in my early 20s.
Yep.
And came back with like 98% like Eastern European,
Yep,
Russian,
me too.
2.5% Asian.
Oh,
Or
wow.
something.
Yeah.
So found a cousin on there, and that's when I found out that my patronymic name, I don't even know if I'm saying that word right, was fake, because he said Venedievna is not even a name. And that's what's on all of my documents. And he said it should be Genadievna for Gennady.
Oh, Gennady. Yeah. It's pronounced. Yeah.
And I was like, "No, I'm telling you, this is what's on all my paperwork." So I found out that was interesting. I did a bunch of Facebook searches. I did, searched my mom's name. Her name's Tatiana Ivanova. And there's so many of those names. It's such, Tatiana is a very popular name.
Yeah.
And Ivanova is the most popular surname.
Ivanova.
Yeah. It's the most popular. It's a Trivial Pursuit question.
Yeah, no, literally, my Russian surname was Novikov. So my mother's name supposedly on the paperwork at the time was Novikova, which is the equivalent of Smith. So that's why they told me, like, yeah, good luck. Yep.
Right. So I searched. I had her name. I had her birthday. I had the place of where I was from, because I have the relinquishment letter.
Yeah.
Which had her passport number and everything. And searched for a while, didn't come across anything. And then on Facebook in 2022, I'm sure you've heard other Russian adoptees on here talking about it. I found out there is a reunion happening in Niagara Falls, Canada. And of all things, for a very specific audience, I thought there's no way that, I feel like this is very targeted, this ad. And I ended up signing up not knowing what I was getting into. And that's when I went to Niagara Falls in July last year. And they gave us more tools for searching, like Odnoklasniki and VK. And they talked about how to find family, how to talk to them, how to be careful about talking to them with everything going on, how they might have, walls up, how you need to also be careful because someone else might be pretending to be them.
Yep.
They actually mentioned it might be someone, who could be in the military and making all these fake, profiles, and you message them and find out they have connections to the US. They could go and, harm those people and whatnot. So they talked about just being very cautious and very careful in these times.
Yep.
And so I looked on OK and ended up, so for those listening, VK is kind of like the Russian version of Instagram. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of younger Russian people on it, whereas OK is more like Russian Facebook. Yep. That's how I've been told. So it's going to have a little bit of like the older audience on there. And so that's actually where I messaged this person on July 15th at 17:46 p.m. Well, so that would be 5:46 p.m. And sent her the basic message saying, hi, my name is Ludmila Ivanova. I was born September 26, and you have the same name as my mom, same birthday. You have a similar job as she had written in her letter. And I was just wondering if this was you. And she wrote back later on saying, do I have any other data? Do I have a hospital number, 2 or 3, for example? And I said 2, I think. And she said, and I've never gotten this response before. So everyone else I've messaged, it's no, sorry, that's not me. There are a few people on OK who have said, no, that's not me. A few people on Facebook who never ended up responding. And so this was like the first time I was actually getting somewhere, and I was like, this cannot be happening. Like on this trip in Canada, like this is amazing. Like, and I was like, am I actually ready for this? And I said 2, that was in the hospital, maternity home number 2. And she asked where I live. And I told her where I live in the States. And then she asked if I had any documents or paperwork or anything. And she asked if I had her patronymic name, and I sent it to her. And I also sent her the letter that she hand wrote. And I happened to have that on my phone. And she said, yes, I wrote it. Oh. And like, I know that must have been hard for her, because being sent the document that's like that.
It's literally a reminder in their own writing of giving up a child. Yeah.
Exactly. Like that's got to be tough.
Yeah.
And so when she sent that, I was like, guys, I need to go back to the hotel room. Like, I think the group of us Russian adults like went out that night, and that's when I got that message. I'm like, I got to go back to the hotel. Like, and I said to her, I want to talk to you more and get to know you better. And she said she needed to think about it, and that she was in shock, because apparently what the doctors told her was that I wasn't going to live and I was just going to die.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing.
Really?
That's serious. Yeah. And that's kind of what they had to say, because they knew for the child to be eligible for international adoption. So basically, you know, you could still be adopted domestically in Russia. It's very
Mhm.
kind of frowned upon. Adoption's a very touchy subject in Russia. The family, especially families, they don't like to talk about it and share that they gave up a
Yep,
child because that's like the worst
exactly.
you could do. Yeah. So the doctors knew that the only way to get these children homes, because no one in the, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia was still rebuilding, and they couldn't afford to take care of all these large amounts of children. So they knew the only way to get them on the international adoption list was to deem them unhealthy and have disabilities, have mental illnesses, and all these bad things, just so the Russian government can say, "Oh yeah, we don't want them." So here you go, take them.
Yeah.
But that a lot of fake diagnosis, a lot of fake diagnoses and things that we don't have, but they say we did, and
They even said I was allergic to vitamin B, which is impossible. You can't live if you're allergic to vitamin B.
yeah.
And they said I was allergic to chocolate. When would I have had chocolate?
Yeah, no, no, this is a good one. So apparently they said I had hydrocephalic syndrome, which is water in the brain. And my dad's a neurologist and he cracked up about that. He's like, oh yeah, when I saw that, I'm like, that's, they're so full of,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Yeah, they are full
Yeah.
of it. So basically, she said she was in shock and she needed time to think. And I was like, take all the time you need. I would love to get to know you.
Yep.
And so she did not respond for 2 days. And I remember the fact that when she sent that, the doctors lied to her. Like, that was so hard for me to process. And because all the time I had been told that she just didn't want me and she couldn't afford it. And to find out the real reason, was just a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So then she wanted to get to know me. Basically, she wrote back saying, "Hi, ask questions. I will answer, but I want to know what's going on in your life right now. It's the best option." So I think she just kind of by that meant, how it translates. She's like, that's, the most important thing is for her to get to know me. And so we talked for a long time about things about each other. You always wonder what you have that came from your biological family. That's the same. And I know we talked about, just different things. So I'm an art person. I got my bachelor's degree in art and photography and minored in business. And ever since I was a little kid, I was obsessed with, I know it's like a small thing, but like just nails, painting your own nails, doing your own nails. I do my nails currently. And I told her that was something I really enjoyed. And I sent her a picture. And she said she likes to do her nails too. Send a picture. We had almost like the exact same color on at the same time, which was, I was like, oh my gosh. And, while I had proved myself to her that I was who I was, I still had that little bit of a voice in me of, is she who she says she is? And one of the questions I ended up asking her was, how long were you pregnant with me? And the reason that question is so unique is because I was actually born 3 months early.
Me too.
And weighed 2 pounds, 1 ounce when I was born. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. See, our stories are very, very pretty much the same.
They really are. And it's such a miracle to not have birth defects, to not have, any ailments really from that. And so I knew that if she said anything like, oh, 9 months full term, or I think I had you full, I knew she would be lying because I knew that she would have only been pregnant with me for 6 months.
Yeah.
For 24 weeks. And I knew that would be a big tell. And she responded immediately saying 6 months.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, this is her.
Yeah.
And I asked her what happened. She said she fell and went into premature labor. And, we got to know each other a little bit more. She shared some really dark stories that I won't really get into, but really personal stories that I was really shocked for just having found her, that she was just open to share, like the most horrific thing that you can think of. Really,
Russians don't. Yeah, it's the Russian culture, especially with family. They don't mess around when you ask them, like, how are you? It's not like in the U.S. where we just say, good, yep, and that's it, and the conversation's over. You ask a Russian how they're doing, they're going to tell you about their family. They're going to talk about their job. Okay, actually, they won't. They don't like talking about work. But they will talk about, like, finance and money. They'll talk about any medical problems they're having. They'll lay it all out there. And especially now that they want to feel like they're close to you because you're a new addition to their family. They're going to treat you that
Yeah.
way. So,
Exactly. And so, yeah, she shared a lot. And then she told me July, I want to say July 19th was when I found out I have a sister.
oh, wow. Yeah.
And I've always wanted a sister. She's a half sister, but to me, she's a full sister. Like, she's the only like blood sibling that I would have,
Yeah.
you know? So to me, it doesn't, sister's a sister,
Yeah.
you know? And the funny thing is, she's also named Ludmila. And so,
Funny you say that. So,
what? You don't, do you have a brother?
so I do have a younger brother, and I do have a younger sister as well, but the younger brother was named after me, Maxime.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. So I found her, she and I talk on WhatsApp
Yep.
a lot, you know, so she and I are very, you know, we have a lot of similarities. I did a photo back to back with us to look at, you know, what's similar. I think she looks a lot like our mom. I think she and I look a lot like each other. Whenever I show people a picture of her, they say, "Oh, I thought that was you."
Yeah.
So it's just a crazy thing to, you know, to be able to have someone who kind of looks like you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you know, it's getting to just learn different things about them. You know, like my mom likes to make these lamps. You just learn different things about, you know, what your family does. And
Yeah.
so she's creative, just like me. And, you know, I guess now I have dreams about meeting them in Russia because I am having issues going back to Russia. And I actually, a year before the war started, I was supposed to go on a trip with my aunt to Russia. She was going to have a work trip. And so I knew the process to go was to get my documents in order, was going to take a while. And so I submitted everything, went through this agency to help, and they got caught up on them needing to know where my mom lived in 1992. And, you know, I don't have that information. And at the time I didn't find my mom. She didn't, you know, so I was like, I don't know where she lived in 1992 before I was born, but she was a Russian citizen by the time she had me. She has a Russian passport, Russian nationality. So like, why does that matter? And they're so hung up on it. And she doesn't remember, you know, where she lived when she was 18 because that was a bad time for her. And I have dreams like in Russian, even though I don't know what's happening, but like just meeting her and all of that. But yeah, just, I know my mom's felt guilt at sometimes, like when we first started talking, when people start to find their families, you might talk a little bit and then you might find that they're kind of more quiet a little bit more.
Yeah.
I found that with my mom because I asked my sister why she hasn't been responding as much. She said she, you know, felt guilty. And I said, she doesn't need to feel guilty. It's not her fault. I have, you know, and she's tried to tell her that. And then, you know, it kind of rebuilded, you know, once I told my mom, I was like, okay, I look forward to messaging you just for her to know that, you know, there's nothing, you do not need to hold back. Like, we are good. Like, I just want to get to know you. She just wants to get to know me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, we talk occasionally. She messaged me on my birthday. She messaged me on my birthday last year too. I knew that was a big question because I'd found her before my birthday and wondered if she was going to, you know, remember.
Yeah.
And she did. And then this year she remembered and wrote to me. And then I sent her voice messages and all of that. And so kind of, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to go into. I know you've probably had questions in between, or
no, that's perfect.
You know, I tell her things like I bought a new car last year, brand new car. I bought a house this year. I started a new job this year. Like, tell her things going on in my life and everything. So it's just, I feel very blessed and to be where I'm at.
Yeah. So wow. All right. So let's unpack a little bit of that. So when you were going through this entire process of finding your family, and then you finally found, you know, you were in touch with your biological mother and now a sister, what were your adoptive parents feeling about all of this? Were they involved or were they not involved? Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, my mom went with me on the trip to Canada.
Yep.
I told her about it and said, you might be interested in going. I just wanted to let you know I'm doing this. And it's really funny growing up when my parents adopted me. Me and my dad were always like, oh, she's adopted. She's from Russia. All of this. And my mom kind of was more secretive about it, was just protective over my information. And then as I found my Russian family, the roles flip-flopped a little bit, which shocked me. Whereas my mom is super interested in what's going on with Tatiana. Do you have new pictures of her? Can you ask her this? Can you ask her that? And whereas my dad, I asked them this, like, how do you feel after me finding them? Whereas my dad said, I just don't want to feel replaced or anything, like he was pretty, he had the idea of our family, the three of us and everything. And I think it's a little bit, I don't know. I feel like he's just more, let's just focus on, because he doesn't ask me anything about them or anything like that. Whereas my mom's just more involved. Yeah. So, and I don't, it's all about making sure what they're comfortable with, as well as them making sure what's comfortable with me as well. Yeah. Because it's not always just about the adoptee. It's also about the people who adopted you too, and their feelings in it as well. So being mindful of both sides to it and being respectful to both sides of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's hard sometimes when you have to balance out, because, when you're dealing with biological family on one side and then your adoptive family on the other side, and you find yourself in this position where suddenly you're like the mediator, where you're trying to please everyone. It's hard because at the end of the day, you don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, but it's going to be a little uncomfortable at first because this is a new territory for you, and it's a new territory for your biological mother as well as your adoptive parents. It's all new, pretty much, So everyone at the end of the day, they're all looking at us to like figure it out.
Yeah.
And so another question I had for you: you mentioned that when you were 18, you got your Russian documents. Why did your adoptive parents withhold information about you for so long, until 18? Or was that not the case and you just weren't interested until 18?
I don't think they purposefully withheld it. I knew when I grew up as a kid and I would ask them, hey, can I look at my passport again? Or can I look at my birth certificate? They would say yes, and they'd pull it from the safe. I think there were only a few times they said no because maybe they just didn't feel like going to the safe, but I didn't know what documents there were other than the ones I'd already seen. I had seen the relinquishment letter, I'd seen the passport, and I think the birth certificate, and that was probably it. So I didn't really know what all there was. The communications back and forth with the adoption agency after coming to the U.S., like there's stuff in there that talks about how I struggled learning English a little bit coming back, and how there's some words, like Koshka, I still called Kat Koshka and stuff like that. And there's all these so many documents that come with it. Yeah. And so I think they only exposed me to a few, and I don't think it was in any malicious way at all. Yeah. I think it was just, you're still a child. This is what I'm going to choose to give to you as a parent, which I think is fair. But once I turned 18, I think they said, you're an adult now. I'm assuming their viewpoint from it was, here's your information. I was so excited because I felt like I could do a lot more searching with it, having all of those papers, and I could finally start searching for things. So if that answers that question.
Yeah, definitely. So you said you were planning, a trip back. Your aunt was going for business and you were going to tag along. And of course, we had COVID, we had a war all of a sudden, and now they're in that situation. But when you were in the planning phase, what was your, itinerary that you were going to do or wanted to do in Russia?
I knew we were going to be mostly in St. Petersburg, which is not at all near Krasnoyarsk. For those who don't know, Krasnoyarsk, if you look at a map, if you find Russia, you'll find Mongolia and Kazakhstan right below Russia. That middle line where those two countries meet and you go up is kind of where Krasnoyarsk is at. And if you divide Russia in half and go a little bit east, that's kind of where it's at. And St. Petersburg is way west of that. So I knew we weren't going to be near that at all. And at the time, I didn't know where my mom would have lived at the time. And I think she's from Ozero, Sudzhansk or something is where she grew up. And my sister was living in Sochi at the time. So I wouldn't have been anywhere near that. I wouldn't have known even where to start looking for them there. But I think I thought a lot about just the trip flying there and just knowing how emotional it would be to finally land back in my home country. Like, my birth country.
Yeah.
And
It's
just having that connection. There's definitely that feeling of something missing growing up that you have, of not knowing where you're from, not knowing, just the not knowing,
Yeah.
And I think I more so visualize. I don't think it really mattered what I was going to do as much on that trip, knowing that I wasn't going to be in a position to really search while I was there, but just more focused on, I get to experience the country where I'm from on this trip and feel a connection that I've not felt since I've left, which I obviously don't remember that connection.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I went back to, so I was in Russia right when they decided to invade Crimea the first time about 9 years ago. I decided it was a great time to travel to Russia. So, but I will say though, like, I couldn't even describe it. I can't even put it in words what it was like when like the clouds broke over the plane. Plane was descending and the clouds separated, and next thing you know it, you see Moscow, the whole city, and then you get closer and closer. You see the old Soviet style like apartment buildings, and you see the big red wall around the red square. And we land, and they're speaking to you in Russian, saying welcome, and then they switch to English and say welcome, and you're just like, whoa. And then like it hits you then, but then next thing you know, you're touring the capital. You're in the Red Square. You're looking at this famous, cathedral, St. Basil's Cathedral, that you see from photos your whole life, and that was like the symbol. That's like like we're from that place. That's our country. That's our symbol of our country, basically.
Exactly.
And now you're there standing, looking at it in person. You're like, okay, well, the photos make it look a lot bigger, but
yeah,
yeah, no. But anyway, so. Another question I had for you, and I'm not sure if you know the answer, but I'm curious. You don't mention anything about a biological father. Is that not in the mix, or?
I'm glad you asked that. So when I found my mom, I asked her information about, who's her mom, who's her family, and I asked her about who my dad would be, and she said that she doesn't know who he was, and I said, okay, well, there's this name on my birth certificate. And she said, that shouldn't be there. They should have left it blank. So I don't think there's any knowledge of any of, and that's okay. I've never really had a desire to find him. It was more my mom that I really wanted to find.
Did you make any other contacts besides your biological mother and sister? Like aunts or uncles or any relatives, grandparents?
She hasn't. So her mom has passed away, I think 10 years ago. I don't think she's in contact with her father, if I even remember if he's alive or not. She hasn't introduced me to any of her siblings. I know she has a brother, and at times when I've asked her, she's told me about me to her other family. I know she's avoided the question. So I think maybe it's a hard topic for her to share with her family.
Yeah.
It could even be the case that she never even told them that she was even pregnant with me, to be honest.
That's a very common, and I wouldn't be surprised with that if that outcome presents itself. I'm just speaking about my story. It's pretty much the same. My biological mother told the rest of the family, I died at childbirth, and that was it. So when I showed back up, that was definitely a big shock, because, my siblings didn't know I existed. My whole family didn't even know I existed. So entering that,
and I'm sure she thought you didn't even exist either.
Yeah. And so it's a big step, and it might take her time just to digest it. But, I'm not saying be pushy, because I don't think that's the right thing either. But if you have, you said you have the name of your biological, technically it'd be your uncle, your biological mother's sibling is, I'm sorry, you said she has a brother.
She has a brother.
That would be your uncle then. So if you had his name, what would say is stopping you from just messaging him yourself?
He may not be on OK. When I go onto OK, I think I see some female, I don't remember, that she has as a relative on there, and it just says relative.
Yeah.
I don't think it describes, and it could. I think there might be another person, but they are both females, I believe. And I just know there was a photo of her hugging her brother that she posted.
Oh, okay.
And I asked her who that was in the photo, and she said that was her brother. She hadn't seen him in a long time. And honestly, I just didn't think to tell her or ask her if, she's told him about me at all or anything. I know I've asked her multiple times about finding an address because they just need that verification of address, which I felt like I got to a point to where maybe I asked her too many times. And then she got sent to a job so her job is she is basically a nurse for, my assumption is truck drivers, where she monitors their health, their heart rate, their temperatures, stuff like that. And they'll send her away for a while to go do that job. And then she'll come back and be off of work for a little bit. And I know I had reached out to another Russian detective about finding the address, and she found my sister. I forgot to tell her that I had actually found my family, and she was like, well, I found your sister. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I already know them. And I'm like, I just need an address. And so she wasn't able to obtain it, but she was like, I can tell her how to obtain it, and she can just send in a request. They can send it to her. Whereas my mom keeps thinking she has to go back to Krasnoyarsk. My sister keeps thinking she has to go to Krasnoyarsk, but I have multiple other people telling me she doesn't have to. So part of me wonders if that's an excuse or if it's what she actually firmly believes she has to do to go back to get. But after I'd asked her again and said I had reached out to someone who knows how to help search that, and I gave her the WhatsApp number of her, she said she would call her, but I don't know. I don't think that's happened. I don't know if it's the thought of her giving that address to me would be like, oh man, she can come here now. I don't know if that's in the back of her mind. And I know there'd be a lot of more red tape that I'd have to run through before that would even happen. But I know she wants to meet me. We've talked about it. We've talked about, she wants to make me a lamp when I visit. But, I think there's parts of her that are, just to go back, more reserved, where she keeps some things more private. And it just may be that her family just doesn't know. More things where she is more forthgiving of information.
I mean, that's understandable. A lot of birth mothers have that in common. Some are going to be slower about, showing you off to the world type of deal, and some are going to be very, very private, and that's just the way they're going to operate. So you just kind of, you did the right thing by establishing that connection. Now it's the next phase is giving it time, and that's sometimes hard to do, but it's worth it, though. I will tell you that it's worth it.
It's just with everything. It's getting to the point to where I'm almost just internally, my desire to see my mom and hug her is getting it's just so strong. I'm almost I don't care if there's a war, no one's going to hurt me. I'm going to go see my mom and give her a hug, just that strong desire just to see her and see my sister. But
I'd advise probably to wait, just because for obvious reasons. But at the end of the day, it's your life. You got to do what you got to do. But I'm sure you're going to do the right thing, because at the end of the day, we only know ourselves best. So, Kat, I do have one more question for you. I like to leave every single episode the same way, and I ask for you to provide advice for the listeners and for everyone else after you.
Okay. Just as far as adoption, finding family, anything,
any advice you can pass on to adoptees, to adoptive parents, adoption in general, anything really. Or if you want to teach them how to make lamps, maybe you might learn yourself from your birth mom.
Right? Very unique. I would say, as far as dealing with the fact of adoption, I know that's hard for some people. Just, it's okay to be at where you're at if you're struggling with that. I think no matter where you're at with any of it, it's okay to be where you're at. And then if you're at the point of where you've accepted that you're adopted, you've accepted that there's this unknown, then I think each stage of the journey that you go through is important, no matter where you're at. And just for, the adoptive parents out there, or the parents who have adopted, to be patient and mindful of maybe what their child is going through, and trying to put themselves in their shoes, and vice versa. And thinking of, what would they be thinking? Are they going to think that they're being replaced when actually it's just extra family? And then as far as searching, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there. There's Russian adoptees, there's FRUA, which is Families of Russian and Ukrainian Adoption, and other neighboring countries. There's a bunch of groups out there. Get in those. They have documents on there of a lot of questions of what you might have thought. Lots of just info and helpful things. As far as searching, you can look on a website called ok.ru. You can look at vk.ru probably. I'm not sure of the site.
vk.com as well works. Yep.
Yep. I know OK will show like birthday, city, stuff like that if their profile is public. And just being patient with it, because I know patience is very hard. That's where I'm like having to really
preach what you say.
Exactly, because I'm very impatient with wanting to see my mom, and just being patient in the time of just waiting. You don't want to ever be too pushy. You want to just, because you can push them away depending on where they are at. There are adoptees who have pushed their bio families away because they did not tread carefully. And one extra thing that people may not think of is before messaging the relatives of the mom to just be, I would hold, personally, this is me, I mean, other people don't have to, I would hold off on messaging relatives of who your mom would have, because they may not know that you exist, and that could cause family tension for her. Something that was kind of thought of. She may not have told her siblings. She may not have told her other kids that you existed. So that would be a shock to them. Some of them may even know, and, they may even respond okay to it. You can't really say there's a universal statement for everything, because everything is different.
And every situation's different. Every family's different. Every dynamic's different.
Exactly. No matter how similar our stories are, there are differences. And to just try and put yourself in the other person's shoes. I can't imagine being a mom. I can't imagine having had a child and then thinking they've been gone for the last, because I found her when I was 28 years old, thinking they've been dead for the last 28 years. So it's just a lot of try and put yourself in both positions. Be very patient and make sure you are mentally prepared for whatever you find out. You don't know if they're alive, and you don't know what they're going through. Just, being okay with whatever you find out, and just, and just, I've been very thankful, very blessed, and all of that. So,
well, that's wonderful advice. Kat, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and a pleasure hearing your story. We really appreciate it. And at any time you have any new information, you are more than welcome to come back and say hello and update all of us with anything that you find. But as always, thank you to the listeners. Thank you to our supporters. We really appreciate it. If you are adopted yourself or know somebody you want to come on the show, check us out, voiceofadoptees.com. We're on all the podcast platforms, and we will see you next episode. Voice of Adoptees. Who am I?
Thanks for listening to Voice of Adoptees. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review. See you next time.